A topographic map relates the specific attributes of sensation or motor control to specific subregions of a structure in the nervous system. For example, a topographic map of the primary motor cortex shows the body parts that move when neurons in a specific area of the primary motor cortex are excited. Similarly, a topographic map of the primary visual cortex shows the locations where neurons increase activity when visual stimuli are presented at specific locations in the visual field. In addition to the cerebral cortex, topographic maps are found throughout the nervous system in areas such as the spinal cord and retina.
So Penfield found the same order of body parts across the motor cortex, really across all the patients he stimulated in. That was the most strikingly consistent thing. And in his famous 1937 paper, he drew the first what they call a homunculus. We talked about a homunculus in the somatic sensation lecture. This is a map of the body parts across the motor cortex. Medial is up here on the top, and then lateral is over here on the bottom. And you can see the lower limbs, the trunk, the upper limbs, and the hands, and the face with the pharynx here, the throat, the tongue, and then the larynx here that controls vocalization. That order of body parts was remarkably consistent across patients. So it seemed like there was this really reproducible body map across the motor cortex. Now, this is how that map was portrayed to me in the textbook that I first learned about motor cortex from. You can see the lower limb here extending onto that medial surface, the trunk up here, the arm, this giant region for the hand, and then the face and the tongue. So this was the map. But when I saw maps like this when I was an undergrad, I was like, oh, that's crazy. There's like this point-to-point map of body parts across the motor cortex. Images like this really give the illusion that each point on the cortex is corresponding to a different point on the body. Obviously, muscles are not points, right? It's a muscle. But still, it would make you think that the feet muscles are over here, and the calf muscles are over here, and the thigh muscles are over here. The only problem is that that is actually not true. And Penfield actually knew that. He knew that the maps were actually blurry, and the areas corresponding to different body parts overlapped. Hearing that word shouldn't be a surprise to you because I stress that about all the maps that we learn about in this class. They're not perfect. They're blurry. Development hasn't made them super precise for whatever evolutionary reason. But images like this really gave people the misimpression that there was a perfect map. And now we better appreciate that the map is quite blurry, actually.
In introductory classes, you learned about many topographic maps in the sensory and motor systems. Here are a few examples. In the auditory system, neurons at specific locations respond to specific frequencies of sound. This is called a tonotopy. In the somatosensory system, neurons at specific locations respond to signals from specific parts of the body, and this is called a somatotopy. In the visual system, neurons at specific locations respond to light from specific parts of the visual field, and this is called a retinotopy. In all three examples, stimulus properties are coded by the location of the active neuron.
Detailed knowledge of topographic maps plays an important role in clinical neuroscience. You've probably seen a doctor on TV examine a patient by asking the patient to track a moving finger, by tapping the knee to check for a small reflexive kick, and by asking the patient to say ah. But did you know that these procedures are all used to test neural function? These tests, along with several others, are collectively called the neurologic exam, which can be combined with knowledge of topographic maps in the motor and sensory systems to precisely pinpoint the location of an injury affecting the nervous system. For example, throughout the motor system, there are somatotopic maps in areas such as the primary motor cortex, brainstem white matter, and spinal cord gray matter. If there are abnormal reflexes in a part of the body, or if muscles on the left and the right side have drastically different strength, these abnormalities would be revealed by the neurologic exam, and knowledge of the topographic maps could be used to infer that a specific subregion of a specific structure has likely been injured.
So now that you've had a bit of review about topographic maps, let's see if you can follow along with this example that relates to the somatosensory system. What we have here to orient you is an image of the brain showing the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and occipital lobe. And the line here is indicating that I've taken a frontal section, which is what I'm illustrating here. We'll assume that this section is going through the anterior-most parts of the parietal lobe, so it would be capturing the primary somatosensory cortex. Here what I'm illustrating is the parietal lobe above this lateral fissure and the temporal lobe below the lateral fissure. And we could draw on top of this gray matter here in the primary somatosensory cortex the topography of this region. What we would find is this. Bordering the midline is where you would find neurons that are selective for stimulation originating in the legs. Along this more superior region is where you would find neurons that are selective for stimuli associated with the trunk. Along this lateral region is where you would find neurons selective for stimuli originating in the arms. And here is where you would find neurons selective for stimuli originating in the face. We can put these two diagrams together. So if, for example, there was a lesion in the somatosensory cortex that was affecting this area here, it would be associated with a loss of sensation in the arms. And that would be approximated as about this region here on a surface perspective. Or if we had a lesion here, it would be associated with the loss of sensation in the face, which we could approximate here on this more superficial perspective.